Hello, you're welcome to Across Cultures on Saskatoon Radio CFCR 90.5 FM. I am Owen Steve, your host. On Across Cultures, I have cultural conversations with guests who have non-Canadian cultural background to promote understanding and the ability to acknowledge, respect, tolerate, and integrate cultural differences as enlightened residents of a multicultural society and foster a sense of belonging. With me today are two guests that will be sharing their insights on living between two cultures, which scholars refer to as liminal experience. I have here with me Marina Esiri-Iyeme Eteng, a HR professional and content creator. Welcome to the show, Marina.
Thank you very much, Wayne, for having me.
You're welcome. I also have here with me Madurja, a recipient of the 2022 Queen Elizabeth II Platinum Jubilee Medal for his community service. Welcome to the show, Madurja.
Thanks, Owen.
So, to get started, since we're talking about cultures, I will start with you, Madurja. How would you describe your cultural background?
Thanks, both of you. Thanks to Owen for inviting me, and welcome to all our listeners. My name is Madurja Ghosh. I was born in Dhaka, which is the capital of Bangladesh. So my first nationality was Bangladeshi. Our ethnic background is Bengali or Bengali. Now when I moved to Canada and then got my PR and then my citizenship, now I became a Canadian. So going back to my roots, we call ourselves Bengali. It comes from the language Bangla or Bengali. Again, that the word Bengali, it's like an English version of the word Bangla.
Okay.
So there you go. We start how culture is changed. Even the name of your culture is changed, right? Mm-hmm. So, and our country is named of this, which is Bangladesh. Desh means country. So the country that has Bengalis, and then
that's amazing.
Yeah, our language is called Bangla. We are Bengalis or Bengali, which means the Bengalis.
Mm-hmm.
And we have the ocean's name is called Bay of Bengal, which is again Bay. So I belong to that culture. It's a culture that is a mix of lots of other cultures, in the sense that we used to be Indian subcontinent, so India, Bangladesh, Pakistan was all together, and it was ruled by the Aryans, and then the Mughals and different other kings, and then came the British, and they ruled us for 190 years, almost 200 years, and then we got independence from British. It became East Pakistan. So Pakistan, because we were on the east of India, it was called East Pakistan, and then the western part was called West Pakistan. And then in 1971 we got independence from Pakistan after a blood-filled war. 3 million people died in that war, and then we became Bangladesh. So we have all this mixture of all these people who ruled us, who were in the country and left some of their things. And British were the main colonizers. There are lots of French colonizers and Portuguese colonizers. So we have all those small details, their food habits, their way of doing things, even their building architectures and all those things, which has come together, amalgamated, and built the Bengali culture.
That's really interesting.
Such rich cultural history.
Yeah, and thinking about all the other mix of other culture from which your culture comes from. I will come to that later.
Sure.
But before I ask a question about that, Marina, tell me how you describe your cultural background.
So how I remember my culture is very not as robust as the way Madurja, right?
Madurja.
Madurja.
I don't know the history part like that, but I know. So I was born in Nigeria, originally from Nigeria. I moved to Canada in 2016. Officially became a Canadian citizen in 2021. So now it's like am I Nigerian Canadian or am I Canadian Nigerian? But whatever, I'm always going to be Nigerian first.
We're still coming to that.
Okay. Let me not jump ahead of things. So what I remember for culture growing up is so I come from the south district in Nigeria. So if you know anything about Nigeria, it's already a diverse country in itself, right? You can have over 100 Nigerians in the same room and they all don't understand each other.
Yeah.
From language, we don't eat the same food, we look different. That's how diverse Nigeria is as a country in itself. So the part of the southern part of Nigeria where I come from, again, still has distinct different cultures, food, ethnicities, language, everything. I grew up in a city called Edo State. When I was born, it was Bendel State, like a mixture of two different states. But sometime in the early 90s, I just dated myself, but okay. Sometime in the early 90s, the two states got split, so it became Edo Delta. Okay. So while I was originally from Bendel, that was the original name, when it got split, my part of origin fell into the Delta State part of things, but we're already living on the Edo State side of things. So I was born in Edo State, but then I'm now from Delta State, right? So it was pretty similar culture, Edo Delta, but I will always be I feel like I'm more of a Bini babe than I'm actually Delta. Just don't let my family members hear that I said that. If they do, I'll deny. Anyway, so I grew up with a mix of the culture of living in Benin City, which is the capital of Edo State, and adopting or retaining the Delta State part of my culture. So our food reflected that. I would eat food that is predominantly significant to the Edo people and also significant to the Delta people. So I already had that mix of culture going on even within the same household. For school, Nigeria was colonized by England, so there was a British touch to the education that I got growing up in Nigeria. For instance, I look at my kids' school here, the way they learn things like spelling and English and things like that. I grew up learning English by transcribing the words first. So I learned the oral way. You learned how to pronounce words by using their sound. Like, so if you're Nigerian and you grew up around the same time, you would do oral English in school, where it's like you open the notes, it's like the person is writing a different language. Yeah. Because we're transcribing all the words into sounds to learn how they're pronounced. So I had a touch of what I'm trying to explain. I had a touch of different cultures, experiences and cultures, even in Nigeria, where everybody's predominantly, we all look the same. Like, it's not racially different, but when it comes to like culture, ethnicities, food, and all of those things that diverse. Are particular, is still very diverse. So
yes, I think what I find really interesting about what you, Marina and Madurja said, is how transient culture is. So for you, Marina, you talked about starting as being in Bendel, and then there was a split or division, and you found yourself being described as another culture. And Madurja also said the same thing about, starting out the Bangladesh people, Bangladeshi. Yes, starting out as part of Pakistani people and then being divided. So going back to that, when you look at your culture as a Bengali, do you see a lot of connection between the Pakistani culture and the Bengali culture? Or would you say that after the split, Bengali people found a way to have their own unique identity? Because I always find it difficult to know the difference from looking from the outside. But you being inside, would you see a Pakistani and say, this is for sure a Pakistani? What is the distinction between, apart from knowing distinctly the name of your culture, the name of your country and all of it, are there things that are distinct about a Pakistani and a Bengali?
I'll I'll come to the distinctness. I'll go back to history a bit, okay? It's not that I just memorized history.
It's a history class today.
So we got independence from, we as in Bangladeshis, Bengalis, we got independence from the British in 1947. India got independence on the August 15th. Pakistan got independence on August 14th. Now the East Pakistan, which is again now the Bangladesh, our culture is Bengali. 90% of the people speak Bangla. Whereas the West Pakistan, it's a big area, and they say in 1952, so 5 years after the independence, they tried to say Urdu, which is again not the most common language, but that will be the national language of both West and East Pakistan.
Okay.
In middle of us is the huge country, India. Now, even in Pakistan, they have Pashtun, they have Urdu, they have Punjabi. Excuse me. So all those, at least I just said 3. There are many other languages, but they try to influence the Urdu because they were the ruling part.
Okay.
And in 1952, there was a big revolt and protest against it, and the students of Dhaka University, they died because they didn't want Urdu to become the national language of the country. And then the government brought in resolution and put that they kept Bangla, they gave Bangla also the standing of another official language. And then that cultural divide came in 1971, where we went to war, and then we got the independence. Why I said that is, you see, to begin with, they have their, again, the biggest, one of the big languages, Urdu. So that's one. But then if you go to their Khyber Pashtun region, they speak in Pashtun, which is another language. So they have, like, among them, as per I know, there are like 3 or 4 big languages and 3 or 4 regions. Whereas when you come to Bangladesh, mostly it's a riverine country, low land, and as I said, 90% of us speak Bengali. What about the other 10%? There are other ethnic minorities and people of other smaller in number minorities who live in, we sometimes call them the tribals, because they live in a tribe in the mountainous areas of Bangladesh or in the remote parts of the country. So but those languages, they call it Kashia, Marma, and all those languages, those also have not similar but like some tone of Bengali. But when it comes to the Pakistanis, they have their own that's mostly based on Urdu and Pashtun and Punjabi words. So from language you can say that. For food, as I said, we have around 700 rivers in Bangladesh, small and big. So our food is mostly fish based. Obviously we have
so there's a lot of
meat.
seafood.
Right, seafood,
I'm gonna
freshwater. Yeah, you will. Freshwater fish,
Do you have
fish.
beaches there as well?
Oh yeah, we have
Oh my
the
God.
world's.
I think that's where my next holiday will
We
be.
have the world's largest non-interrupted and nature-made, not man-made, nature-made, non-interrupted, the biggest beach in the world. It's called Cox's Bazar.
Really?
Yeah.
In Bangladesh?
Yeah, it's more than 100 kilometers, and it's non-interrupted
Wow.
and natural, as in humans didn't make it, because you will see now in lots of the places in bigger cities, they go in and put sand and just they try to extend it so that they can build more hotels in front of it and stuff like that.
And we
But
can tell when it's not. a
Yeah,
real
we
beach.
can tell
We
when
can
it's
tell.
not
Just
exactly,
saying.
Exactly.
Yeah. And now they have a marine drive, they call it. Like you can do the whole thing. I mean, almost the whole thing. Like you can drive beside the sea. So coming back to the point, the food is obviously different because there are lots of rain happening, lots of rivers, so we have more fish and those sort of things. And because of the weather, our dresses, it is, again, going back to that, it is similar. We also wear Punjabis and kurtas and stuff, which is almost similar, but you will see on the cuts and things, it's a bit different. We were lungi, which is again common in the Myanmar and those sort of area. In the Pakistan, the country of Pakistan, or people from that, they generally wear the kurtas and things like that, which is like pants, but it's like a bit loose fitting, so it's just easier. But the lungi, it's like or like dhotis, which you can just wrap around. It's like one cloth. You just wrap around and tie it. Again, that's another thing that's different from them. So these are the subtle differences.
Yeah, I love how you said there are subtle differences, and how you, when you were mentioning the differences, you talked about food, clothing, language, and it's interesting that for the most part, when people talk about culture, these are the things they look at. They look at, oh yeah, you speak a different language, you wear different type of clothes, different type of food, maybe different type of festivals as well. But Marina, do you think that culture is way beyond food, outfit, language, and festivals?
Absolutely. Because the way people judge culture, it's almost always from the things that are tangible, what they can see. So when I look at a person, what are their distinct features? That's all that I know informs me about what their culture is.
Yes.
But the truth is, it goes way beyond that. Because imagine living in a place for, say, 10, 20, 30, 40 years, and then you move to another place. It's pretty much that place where you were born and you had all of those years of experience. Is pretty much how you think. It's pretty much how you talk. And I don't mean accent. It's how you're stringing the words together. Sometimes it's the tone of your voice. It's the pace at which you speak. Shading myself as a Nigerian there. The speed at which you
And when
speak.
they say Nigerians always scream.
Especially when we're excited.
Yeah.
Sorry, we're happy people like that, So all of those things come together to form what culture is. Beyond just how people look on the outward, it is the essence of who they are as people. Sometimes it's hard to explain all of this tiny nuances except you encounter them in the moment and ask questions, then you can get the answers. But for sure, it goes way beyond just what's on the outward.
I loved how you talked about encountering them in the moment and asking questions. I will come back to that to discuss about that. But if you're just tuning in, this is Across Cultures on CFCR 90.5 FM. And I have Marina and Madurja with me here talking about living between two cultures, which scholars refer to as liminality. Now, going back to what you talked about as those subtle aspect of culture. When you look at coming to Canada, you said Marina, you've been here
8 years.
8 years. Madurja, you've been in Canada for
11 years.
11
or so,
years.
Yeah.
Okay. Now, from what both of you said, you're coming from a society where everybody looks the same because you all identify as the same racial. You all have the same racial identity, right? Even though they're ethnic difference. Madurja, you talked about 90% being a particular ethnic group and 10% being another ethnic group. But coming back to Canada and seeing that you moved from being perhaps a majority from where you're coming from to now being referred to as a visible minority.
Right.
What does that mean for you? I'll start with you, Marina.
First of all, there's nothing minor about me. Let's just put that out
I
there.
love that.
I borrowed that from one of my big sisters. When she said it, I'm like, yes, you
There's
put it
nothing
nicely.
minor
I'm adopting
about
that.
me.
There's
Yes.
nothing minor about me. But coming to Canada, I think one of the first, there's a way you know something in theory to say, okay, there are different kinds of people. People are from different backgrounds. They look different. They're different races. Those things I was taught in school in Nigeria. When I learned history and learn about other countries, I know that, okay, not everybody looks the way I do. But I think one of my first realizations hits me when I moved to Canada. Like, it's not vacation. I'm here. This is home
To
now.
stay.
The first reality that hit me was, oh boy, you are black. That's the first time I realized.
Did you ever think of yourself as black?
I would
before
never
you
think
came
about
here?
myself in terms of
Or
race.
describe yourself, yes.
I would never describe myself by race. I can
term-
describe
yeah.
myself based on the
Continent
unique
and African
yes,
and yeah.
Yes, I would describe myself even back in Nigeria. Like when I want to describe myself, I might refer to like the unique distinctions of the ethnicity that I'm from, but I never ever looked in the mirror and said, oh, okay, I'm a black girl. Like, no, that's how everybody looks. But until I came here, I was like, oh boy, okay. Like, yeah, I am black. Not like there's anything wrong with that, but I just became a little more visible, a little more distinct when I stand beside people who are from other races. And then to be referred to as a visible minority, I try not to overthink things, right? I try not to apportion too much extra meaning towards some things, what they sound like, right? Yeah. It just means that in this place, if you're going to categorize people by where they're from, more people are from other places than from where you're from.
Yes. Not
because I am less as human, not because I am anything less than human, right? It's just that's the version, that's my story and I'm sticking with it. So that's how I try not to overthink things. But when I look around me, when it even comes to like finding the stores to find the kind of food and the kind of condiments that I eat, it's a reminder that this is the minority, right? When I
walk into, many of us here that eat this.
Yeah. To be fair, I would say things have changed a lot, because when I moved here 8 years ago, some of the big stores didn't have international aisles. I'm seeing them now. I'm seeing things that I would recognize from outside of Canada. They are now creating aisles to say, okay, this is different variants of things just to cater to the changing demographics, which is great because, for the longest time, it's just in a bit tone deaf, like selling the same kind of things, and the demographic was changing. So I can look around and see how that would play out in just finding the things that I need and knowing that, okay, there's still more people who eat these other things as against what I'm aware of or what I'm used to from where I'm coming from.
Yeah. So Madurja, would you agree that when you first came to Canada as well, it felt like you had more awareness about the way you look, being a minority in quotes? Would you say you have more awareness about that, or it kind of came to a full light for you as well, because you're coming from a country where everyone else looked like you, or at least majority of the people looked like you? So how did that awareness make you feel as well, and what were some of the things that you had to adjust to based off of that awareness?
I think when I came, there were I guess all three of us and lots of people who are listening to this, we all faced our own share of racisms, which gave you the more, feeling of, okay, because we're not the same, that's why he or she is behaving the way they're behaving, right? I think the society has in Saskatoon, the community in Saskatoon, in Saskatchewan, has moved forward a lot in the last 11 years.
Absolutely.
And it has thankfully gone in the good direction. Going back to the question, yes, obviously when you come from a country where it's mostly, people of your own culture who look like you, who talk like you, who eat like you, and most of the times think like you, and you go to a different country, you will feel the difference. But until you are treated badly, you do not feel any problem. If someone gives you, like, for example, if you ask for, like Bengalis, generally we eat rice and like lentil and meat or fish, and obviously, vegetables. So if you go and ask for a platter, if you ask for that and you get sandwiches, which of your preferred meat or whatever, you'll be like, okay, maybe they just don't have it. But if someone tells you, like, what is this food that you're eating? Rice? Like rice and lentils? Like, you eat that? Or something like that? Then that's when you find that, okay, maybe this is not the norm here, quote unquote norm here, right? If they just said, oh, okay, we don't have it, like, this is what we have, then you're like, okay, they just sold out or something.
Don't have it,
yeah. But if they make that, if they have that conversation without knowing your, giving you a bad vibe, a bad tone, that's when you feel that. Now, I would say even even I'll give you well, it sounds funny now, but it you'll see how it goes back to that racism and discrimination. We were having when I was in Edder School of Business in EOFS, we had some kind of speaker event, and after the event we were just talking, like there were like 10 or 20 of us, and all of us were in the accounting students, because by then we have decided our majors. So we were just talking, and someone said, they were just talking about, I think, Game of Thrones or some famous show. And after like 4 or 5 minutes, I contributed to the conversation, like, oh, I like that character or something like that. And then one of the students who is, I sort of looked up to her, like, she is so brilliant. She is like always on the top of the class and everything. She just said, oh, you watch the show? Like, and I thought she just meant that if I liked the show.
Yeah.
And I said, no, I like the show. And then we were just talking, I think we were then talking about Big Bang Theory, and I said, oh yeah, I watch that sometime as well, and I like Sheldon Cooper, something like that. I again contributed to that. And then and I saw the awe on her face again. And so that conversation ended, and I think in middle of the conversation somewhere, or maybe later, she said, oh, I never imagined like you watch so many English shows and movies and whatnot. I said, I then told her like all the shows I watched, like Breaking Bad, this, that. I mean, my parents are not happy about it. Like, I watched so many shows and
but
stuff.
You watch them anyway.
Yeah. And I watched lots of football, and the actual football, soccer.
Yeah.
Echo that.
Yeah. So going back to that, if she just said, oh, I didn't know you liked Game of Thrones, like in a regular tone, then we'll have a conversation. Oh, why don't you like it? Or, oh, this is why I like it. But the way she said it, oh, you watch this show, then you feel that thing that you are from.
It feels like there is a preconceived
notion
right. about who you are, what you do, things you like,
and how your life is supposed to be.
And then I told her, or in one of the other discussions, that, do you know, in Bangladesh, from even the play grade or whatever they call it, like the nurseries, we have Bengali and we have English. Maybe because it's not our mother tongue, that's why we do not obviously speak it the way you want us to speak fluently. But we learn, like, if you go to the street of Bangladesh right now, in obviously maybe not the most rural part, even in the most rural parts, if you say the common words in English, I would say 80% of the people will understand. In the bigger cities, I would say even like 90-100% of the people, they will understand it. They will, like, if you say food, eat, rice, bread, like, they will know what's going on, and they will help you. So the inherent racism that we get, and this goes back to the colonialism.
You know what? Just hold that thought. When we come back, I want us to really get into that. Let's take a commercial break now. And when we return, we'll continue the conversation on liminality, the experience of living between two cultures with Marina and Madurja. Are you a newcomer to Canada for less than 1 year? Immigrant Muse, in partnership with TELUS, offers newcomers a special phone rate starting at $34 per month, with 50 gigabytes of data and 1,000 minutes for international calls. For starters, you can get a free no-obligation preloaded SIM card to help you hit the ground running for the first month when you land Canada. After that, you can retain the same number with TELUS preferred rates for newcomers using our code DCC7691. You don't need a credit card or credit history to access this offer, but you can use this to build your credit history in Canada. So what are you waiting for? Visit immigrantmusemagazine.ca to access our exclusive newcomer offers. Welcome back to Across Cultures on CFCR 90.5 FM. If you're just tuning in, I have Marina and Madurja with me here, sharing about their liminal experience of living between two cultures. And just before we went on break, Madurja had just shared the experience he had with a classmate when he was still in school here. And I have a question about that. A lot of times when people experience microaggression or racism, they wonder if it's an opportunity for them to educate the person who is showing racism, who is being racist, or who is displaying microaggression. When you had that experience, did you think is there a way the person could have asked that question that it becomes less annoying for you? And was there anything you thought you could have done at that point to educate them? Do you think it was an opportunity to educate the person, or it was just too much of an annoying experience for you that you'd rather just call them to order and let it go?
Well, going back to that specific event, I mean, I was gonna say that I do not blame her specifically or personally. It's just the environment that she was maybe brought up in, or the culture that she was facing, and the environment, the background that she was in, that made her think that if a person is from a different country whose mother tongue is not English, he or she cannot consume the regular popular media. Now, to bring in how the education part, you can always do that, but it depends if you have your necessary education. Maybe you know about some of the things, but not the whole thing. Second thing, if you have the time and capacity and everything. I mean, if you want to do it
mental capacity, because educating people when they say things like that, I feel like it takes a level of mental capacity for you not to display anger and to decide, you know what, this is a teaching moment and I am going to teach you.
I just feel like you need a certain level of emotional dissonance to be able to remove the emotions you're feeling in the moment and take advantage of that time as a teachable opportunity. For me, I read the room. Like, no, I'm not going to steal this from you, Madurja.
No, it's okay. No, go ahead.
For me, I learned to read the room, right? And go with what I have the capacity to do at the moment. There are times where I'm like, I throw it back to the person and ask questions. It's okay. What informed that line question, of thought? Like, what are you trying to learn about me by asking me that? Or what do you want? What's the information you're looking for? Sometimes when I ask that question, they call themselves to order to say, no, actually, this is how I meant it.
Yeah, that's not how I meant.
Somehow I can almost always tell. It's hard to explain. I can tell. It's almost like you can touch the intention to say, okay, this comes to me like it's genuine curiosity, but this other time it does look like there's a bit of condescension in the undertone. And when I find out that that's what it is and I ask those questions, the people immediately get defensive. So it convinces me that actually
you were right.
You were not interested in learning. You just wanted to project your ignorance on me. And at times like that, I step away from it to say, okay, no, not today. I'm not your elementary school teacher. Google is there to help you for whatever you're curious about. But for the other times where it is genuine curiosity, and when I turn the question back, they're like, okay, this is how I meant it. This is what you said, and this is what sparked the curiosity, and this is what I'm trying to find out. So we understand where both of us are standing to say, okay, what is the motive here? What are you trying to learn? How can I help that in the moment? So I read the room, like depending on how the conversation is, who the conversation is, because for me, I have been in that awkward situation. It was at work. The comments were by people who were like, would outrank me by far, like when it comes to like leadership ranking. And that's not the time. I'm not about to lose the job and call out my director and say, no, you should not be saying that.
That is microaggression.
Yes, it's microaggressive, but at times like that is to know when to bite your tongue, go and sulk at home and show up the next day good and ready to do your work, right? But there have been opportunities as well where my opinion was asked and I said, actually, I would approach this differently. And when I mentioned it, was like everybody said, we all did it wrong, and they all just started trying to re-explain. I could tell that it was a genuine miss in the moment. So again, a lot of times it's just reading the room. What is the tone of the conversation? Who are these people? Like, is the relationship with this person important to me after now? If it's somebody I'm meeting for the first time and chances are we may not meet again, it's probably not a hill I'll die on. But if it's my colleagues who are out having a good drink, like in your case, it was your classmate, right? It was important to address something just so that it doesn't become awkward afterwards. So sometimes you want to teach, some other times it's like, no, peace out, I'm out of here.
I'm not your elementary school teacher. Like you said, if you need to learn something, visit Google. We're not in the Stone Age where you couldn't easily get whatever information you want to get, right? And coming to learning, you talked a lot about curiosity and learning. And I feel like as people from non-Canadian culture now living in Canada and now being called Canadians, there are usually a lot of learning that goes into being able to live and survive within the Canadian culture, because you're coming from a totally, maybe not totally different, but a somewhat different culture, and you have to be able to make some adjustment to survive in this culture. Madurja, what are some of the things that you felt you did to be able to combine your Bangladesh culture with the Canadian culture and still be able to hold on to your authentic self? Because I see a lot of people come in and feel like they need to change everything about themselves. True, there are certain things we need to change if we must survive within this cultural environment, even though Canada is said to be a multicultural environment, but still there are things that has to change. So what were some of the adjustments you would say you had to go through, some of the learning experience that you had in order to be able to survive within the Canadian culture?
Right. So when we say Canadian culture, according to the Charter of Rights and the Constitution, all of us have the right to freedom of expression and freedom of our own belief, the way we believe, and do our own cultural things as long as it's not prohibited by the law. Absolutely. So when I came in, I tried to go to the events like Soup and Bannock events that I went to. Now when I went to the event, I see it's only because it was organized by an Aboriginal Student Association or the Aboriginal Center, only the Aboriginal people were going in. So when I looked, it wasn't limited to them. It's just that on our mind, we think that because they're arranging it, we shouldn't be going. So when I came in, I tried to change that mindset on my own. And then when my wife came in many, many years later, I tried to tell her, take her to the events or, watch a YouTube video on the culture, on the history of this land that we are living right now. The colonialism, the latent colonialism, I want to say, makes us think that on the Soup and Bannock events, only the Aboriginals should be going. On the Rock Your Roots programs that happen every year, Walk for Reconciliation programs that only people who are associated with it they are the one who should be attending it. That's not the thing. Look at it this way. Now you will see lots of big corporations are celebrating Black History Month, Asian History Month, even the
National Indigenous Day.
Exactly, National Indigenous Day. Even the religious events like Diwali, the big one, and the other ones like the Eid and other things. Do you think 20 years ago, 15 years ago, 30 years ago, those didn't exist? No, they existed. It's just people, because there wasn't much representation, education, and the person who had the responsibility didn't care enough to Google and find out why 5 people of the office is taking off today who are from a specific region. It's because they have Eid today or they're celebrating Diwali today or something. Didn't care to ask. That's why they didn't know it. So and when there is representation, that's when and there is obviously the education moment when you talk to your boss and say, hey, I'm taking off. Guess what? Because this is happening, maybe bring some food next day just to celebrate with your colleagues. That's when they will learn. And that's what I think is the best way. You do it with respect. You
Absolutely.
just don't just throw it, okay, this is the food, that's it. You give the context, like, because this is Eid, we celebrate Eid, and this is what we eat in Eid, because this is sweet, gives me a good feeling, that's why you eat it. This is Diwali, that's what we do because blah blah blah. That's when people, again, if they're in the mindset, if they have the capacity, then they will learn.
True.
And that's how we can bring in the change that we need.
And I think it's really a challenge that people who work in diversity and inclusion need to think about within the corporate structure of every organization, because we're talking about Canada, Saskatoon, Saskatchewan being multicultural. And we are not putting into consideration the cultural background of people in the things we celebrate at work, in some of the educational opportunities that we have at work, but bringing it down to the personal, individual learning. For you, Marina, what were some of the things that you did on a personal level to help you adjust to the Canadian culture? And were there things you would say you particularly went out of your way to try to change, or maybe even still struggling with?
So yes, there were things that I had to learn. When I first moved here, I went to school.
Okay.
And my class was my first impression of Canada as a country. It was the first time that I was going to be in like close relationships with people who were from like diverse cultures for like an extended period of time, because we're all studying together. So what I try to do with that is I'm naturally curious. I would ask questions. I would offer my opinion on things. So when we have maybe like projects in school where we're doing like simulations and they ask us to represent something that means something to us, guess what? I'm bringing something from my Nigerian culture to say this is who I am. And a lot of other people were doing that as well. So I got an opportunity to find space for myself to express my authentic background. This is who I am. And then I also got an opportunity to learn from other people, because I think it's a two-way street.
Absolutely.
If we're looking to teach people to hold space for us, we also have to be willing to extend that grace to other people as well, to say, okay, I want to get to know you too. So that's what I did. And I had a friend who was from Burma. Like, she took me around Saskatoon. Like, most of the first diverse food that I tried, it was her. Shout out to you, girl, you know. It was her. She would take me around restaurants. I would try Thai, I would try Italian, all the different non-Nigerian food that I ate. She introduced me to all of them. Introduced me to all the different variants of poutine, like pulled pork, butter chicken, all of them I tried, you know, and I was willing to try. So that was another thing, because I was curious about this new place that it's my now home. Is it going to be my forever home? I don't know. But right now, right here, this is home. How can I make this work? And then like I said, I offered my opinion. Like when they ask questions, to say, oh no, I didn't think that would happen in Africa. Like I've spoken English my whole life, right? I didn't have the language barrier when I came here, but it was amazing how much I explained to people why I could speak English. Sometimes people would ask me, how long have you been here? I'm like, 4 months. And I go, wow, you learned English in 4 months. I'm like, actually, no.
I've been learning English my whole life.
I've spoken English my whole life. Like, my thoughts are in English, so I don't know what you mean.
English is like my first language.
So it was a lot of conscious adjustment. And I love the reference to especially learning about the history of the land, because I find that there's a lot of misconception there as well. There was a lot that was handed down to say, oh no, just don't live there, don't do this, avoid this. I'm like, why?
Avoid this part of the city.
Yes, avoid it. And I'm like, why? But nobody ever had any explanation as to why. It was like, that's what we're told. So it kept getting handed down until I'm like, no, we have to find out why. Like, question that. So I started to do some reading myself, like learned about the history. And then when I went into school, I had classmates as well who would share some of their history. I'm like, that explains why. Like, of course, if you were in difficult positions like that, like, what did you think the outcome was going to be? So from all of that learning, providing information and putting myself out there, it also opened me up to knowledge, to learn about the things that I would not already have known, or I would not ordinarily have known if I didn't put myself
out there. Yeah, I love how you said it's a two-way street. But I feel like for people living between cultures, it's more of a three-way street.
Yes.
And the reason I said this is because you have your own culture, and then there's the Canadian culture. And you have friends, family members from your culture back home, and you have friends, family members from your culture in Canada. And it takes a level of adjustment to be able to efficiently communicate with all those people.
Balance all of it.
Exactly, to balance all of it, because you need to make some adjustments to speak with a Caucasian Canadian, for instance. You need to make certain adjustments to speak with your family members who are also dealing with conversing, interacting with Caucasian Canadians, for instance. And then you have your family members back home who are so used to the culture where you're from. They probably have never left there. Nothing about their culture has had to change. And a lot of times you have to remember to make adjustments when you interact with them as well. How do you combine all of that, living in that? There was something I read about liminal experience, as scholars call it, and they say it's more like you're in between being alive and being dead. You're neither alive, you're neither dead.
That's extreme.
You're neither, I know, right? You're neither here nor there. It's like living between two different things, and you have to learn to balance, like the word you used, Marina, balance interactions with all those people, and always make a mental switch when you're switching to talking to someone else. 1 minute you're talking to somebody, for instance, Marina, somebody from Nigeria. The next minute you're talking to your kids who have lived almost all their lives here and understand little to nothing about being a Nigerian, but still you want to inculcate Nigerian cultural experience with them. And the next minute you have to switch mentally to talk to people who have zero understanding of what being a Nigerian is like. How does that experience show up for you, and what are some of the challenges that you encounter with that? I'll start with you, Marina.
So I thought it was a bit extreme to say between life and death, but I cannot understand what that means. Because for me, what is happening now is I feel like I am losing touch with the authentic Nigerian side of me. And why I say that is my family members now predominantly live in countries other than Nigeria. My parents are no longer here. My parents-in-law are no longer here. So it's almost like my ties to my home country, the ties are getting weaker. And I still do not feel fully accepted in Canada. So right now I feel like I'm no longer Nigerian enough, because when I have conversations with my friends and my family, it's like, you're sounding like Canadian. That's not how things work here anymore. And I'm like, it's been 8 years. Like, it could not have changed that drastically. Much. But actually, it has. The way I think, my default is no longer the Nigerian side. So sometimes I have to do like a quick switch when they remind me to say, oh no, you're sounding Canadian. That's not what's happening here. So sometimes I have to catch myself and then say, oh, okay, tell me more about that pattern. Still try to keep in touch, and that's one way I'm doing it. Try to keep in touch with my friends, especially now that it's no longer predominantly family. Like typically what it would have been if I still had parents alive in Nigeria, we would travel home frequently to keep those lines of connections going, especially across the generations now that I have kids. But now that I don't have that, I have to depend on friends or parents of friends, or even parents of friends who are here right now, who have been too Nigerian to have the Canadian change anything. So those are the knowledge reservoirs that I'm depending on right now to say, help me pass some of these things down, So that's one way I'm doing it with my kids. They are more Canadian than Nigerian for sure, because my kids were 3 and 2 when we moved here. Okay. They are like 12, 11 and 10 now. So they have lived more here than they lived in Nigeria. But they are curious about Nigeria. We keep those communications, the lines of history conversations going. Teach them about where it started from. Up to yesterday, I was still telling them about what my childhood looked like, some of the games that I played, some kind of things that I played with, and how different it looks for them. So we keep those conversations going. I keep lines of communication open with the nephews that I still have in Nigeria, and for the ones who are no longer in Nigeria, we keep the communication going. So when I talk about Nigeria being communal, like we like to, we family support each other, we're all there for each other. They see me do that with my siblings. So it's beyond just what I'm saying. It's the life that they see us live.
Yeah.
And then when it comes to like food, they're still very, very excited about Nigerian food. I mean, my family is still predominantly Nigerian. When we're in my house, yes, it's in Saskatoon, but that is Nigeria in there. So with food,
Nigeria in Saskatoon.
Yes. So with our food, it's still predominantly Nigerian in there, just so that they don't lose that. If they decide that they're going to try other things and then blend the culture and decide, okay, maybe I want to tone down the Nigerian part, that's going to be on them. But for me, I'm exposing them to everything, giving them options to say, you can actually be both. You're not Nigerian or Canadian. You are Nigerian and Canadian. It can be both, and they're seeing us live it on a daily basis.
Yeah, I would come back to talk about being both Nigerian and Canadian later. But to you, Madurja, also, how does it show up combining all that? Because for you, it's your wife and your other Canadians that you deal with and people back home. Right? How do you combine all of it so you don't lose your authentic self? And in the first place, what is even your authentic self? Because before you came to Canada, it's like my authentic self is being a Bangladeshi. And right now, I'm in Canada. I'm Canadian Bangladesh or Bangladesh Canadian. What does that look like? How does a Bangladesh Canadian interact with another Bangladesh Canadian within your home, which is your wife, and the full Bangladesh people back home and Canadians in Canada? How does that look like for you?
I think obviously there will be things that are said and meant in your familiar circles that you will not be doing or saying outside to a person who doesn't have that cultural context. Like an example, like I really love soccer, football, and you'll see in people from like Nigeria or African countries, after they score, they like to dance.
Of course.
And some of the managers, like football managers, they'll be like, that was too much, celebration, and they'll be like big things about it. But for them, it's just the regular thing. I know lots of Nigerian footballers, Victor Osimhen, Wilfred Ndidi, Ilechi Iheanacho. I know a lot of them. John
We should
Obi
give you a Nigerian name.
Yeah.
Actually.
Yeah. And then shout out to my friend Lola Adebugun. She is actually also from Nigeria. Her family is from there. She actually visited, I think, last year. So you know that cultural context that you have in the family, you obviously will not have outside of the family or of your home. But again, it's going back to that educational thing. When you if you're talking to someone and you see that they're interested, then you share some of it. If they're more interested, you share more of it. It's like that. You are a representation of lots of things. Like the nose that is sitting on my nose right now, the shape and the color of it, maybe it's from my grandfather's, and maybe the hair that I have is from someone else. We are representation of lots of things, but those are the things we cannot change, is what I meant.
Yeah. But
there are things that you can change, and that's how you present yourself, your background, your culture, your history, those things. When that's why when my wife came after her visa and everything worked out, I told her always that we need to obviously celebrate our culture, but also know the culture of the land, which is the Aboriginal culture. We have all other people who are from different part of the world. We need to celebrate their culture as well and learn about it. And obviously, if you're invited to a Christmas party, you do not dress up as a Diwali party. And when you said how do I mix the cultures, well, when I come in Saskatchewan, in Saskatoon, I can wear my Punjabi, the traditional wear, but I'll have to wear a jacket on top of it. It's just
especially in winter.
In winters, right? So you just have to be conscious of the thing and do as it is, instead of having a set mindset that this is how it will go and just doing it like that.
Yeah, I love what you talked about, not having a set mindset, right? Having an open mindset to things that could change, things that would adjustment that you would make. And that's going back to what you said, Marina, about keeping also an open line of conversation with your kids about talking about the Nigerian culture and passing that knowledge along, and whatever they choose to do with it, that is absolutely their choice. But then when you look at being a Nigerian Canadian for you, I would most likely say for your kids it's Canadian Nigerian, because they are more Canadian than they are Nigerian. Would you see in your home, do you see a cultural clash between how you want to do things? I know, like you said, some things have changed. You are not your authentic Nigerian anymore. You've tried to make some adjustments to accommodate the culture where you are right now. But do you still see a clash between you being the way you want to do things, the way, the values you have, the way you speak, your culture, you as a person, and maybe your husband too, you both are Nigerian Canadian, as opposed to your children, Canadian Nigerian? How does that show up in your house, in your home?
Okay, so first of all, we're not traditional Nigerian parents.
Okay.
Even while we're in Nigeria, my husband and I have more of an egalitarian kind of mindset. So we don't have the core traditional, mommy does this, daddy does that. We don't have that. So that in itself can create some kind of confusion for my kids. Like when they go to other places and see, oh, daddy is the one who does this and mommy is the one who does this, and it's the opposite that happens in our house. We try to let them know that, look, there's no one way to do it. Everybody is going to adopt a method that works for them, and if it's working for them, that's fine. But in our household, this is how this works. Things. One area that I see a lot of clashes is when it comes to how children deal with adults and calling them by their first names. Goodness gracious, it still makes me
literally rolling my eyes right now. Do you have that in Bangladesh as well? Back home, do you have younger people calling adults by name, or do they call them like auntie, uncle?
Yeah, we have to say it auntie,
uncle. Yeah.
So that I struggle with even till now, to have my 10-year-old address an adult by their first name. You try that in Nigeria, you're dead. Like,
yeah, I know.
Like strangers can literally stop and beat you up on the road,
and your parents will thank them.
Yeah, you know. So we still struggle with that, and I let them know that, look, in school it's okay for your teachers to be Miss this, Miss that, or for your caregivers, call them by their first name. That's what's acceptable to them. But in the Nigerian culture, children do not call adults by their first names. You say Mr., you say Sir. You don't say hi to greet. You say good morning, sir. Good morning, ma. That's how it is acceptable in the Nigerian culture. And because you're Nigerian as well as Canadian, you are going to learn both. So sometimes my children are confused. I come from a large family, 16 children. I'm child number 14. First of all, they don't understand, how is everybody my uncle? I'm like, I'm sorry. I have too many siblings. Not my fault, not yours either, but that's your uncle right there.
Yeah.
So my daughter is like, Mom, I can't keep up with the uncles and aunties. I'm like, I'm sorry, deal with it. That's what it is. You know, so those clashes, that one is the example that jumped at me, but we keep the communication open and just help them understand that, look, you know what's more beautiful than being one? It's been both. It's having a blend of more than one culture to look at. To have more than one place you can call home is a blessing in itself. So let's not complain, take the advantage.
Yes, totally. I think one thing that has stood out to me today is talking about keeping an open mind and being willing to learn. And sadly, we have come to the end of this show today. We have so much to talk about, but we have to come to the end of the show right now. Thank you so much for joining us today, Marina and Madurja. It's been such an interesting privilege to learn with you on the journey of liminal experience.
It was great learning. I feel like I know a little more about your culture now.
Me too.
Absolutely. And for all of you, our audience that tuned in today, thank you for tuning into this episode of Across Cultures. It's been such a learning journey hearing about Marina and Madurja's experience. You can listen again to all episodes of Across Culture on my YouTube channel or podcast, Oyin Steve. If there is any topic you would like us to talk about, feel free to send us an email, oyinsteve@outlook.com, or if there's somebody you would like us to have on the show to talk about cultural conversations, please do that. Once again, I am Oyin Steve, and this is Across Cultures.